Well, good morning, everyone. You are listening to the Monday version of Let Us Reason Together, and I'm so glad that you have joined us this morning. And I've got several guests a couple of different guest hosts this morning with me, and I'm glad to have them. I'll introduce them here in a moment, but I want to get us started here on the show. Thank you for your patience and waiting on the show this morning. It is Monday. And it is the 6th of May, 2019, and it is the first day of the second month of Iyar in the Hebrew year 5779. And it is the 16th day in the counting of the Omer, if I got the counting right. So I'm John Craig, your second day of the week host for Let Us Reason Together, and I appreciate you all joining us. And by the way, while I'm saying this is... if you like the show and you like what's going on and the things that we're talking about, give us a thumbs up and pass this show around, post it to your social media, let people know about what's going on here at Lamb on the Lamb Network. And I wanted to mention this as well, that you can catch all of our shows and all of our live shows on the Lamb Network over on MessianicLambRadio.com. So if you trying to figure out where to find it on YouTube, or it's not always popping up on your YouTube, just go to MessianicLambRadio.com and you can catch our shows there. Well, what's going on today? Well, I missed last week because we had a bunch of fun stuff listed, but because of logistics and needing to take care of my wife, we decided to cancel the show. And I appreciate everyone that prayed for Sandi throughout the week. She is back home from the hospital. Now, under doctor's order, she is resting as if she is supposed to be in the hospital one more week. So she's just doing it here at home, taking her meds and all that sort of stuff. So thank you for praying and continuing to pray for a full recovery for her. Well, what is today? Today is Crazy Ideas Day. Yeah, crazy ideas. Do you have some crazy ideas? Maybe those crazy ideas can be great ideas. So don't let anybody discourage your crazy ideas unless it's like insane. Maybe you don't want to be too insane about things. How about this? International Day of Fighting Against Stupidity. Yes, today, no more stupidity. All right. So all of you wives that are listening out there, I guess it's one of those days you can put your foot down about your husband and his maybe crazy ideas and stupidity. No, I'm just kidding. I'm having fun with it. How about this? No Complaints Day. So while you're putting your foot down, don't complain about it. Just redirect. How about that? And then it's also Pinky Independence Day. Can you move your pinky without moving any other finger? It's Pinky Independence Day. I don't know where that came up with, but hey, it's Pinky Independence Day, and it's Carrier Pigeon Honorary Day. How about some other things going on? It's Great Lakes Awareness Day, International No Diet Day, so it's okay to eat the cheesecake today. And then Joseph Brackett Day and Melanoma Monday. It's Melanoma Monday, observed on the first Monday in May. Be aware. Watch what's going on with your skin and research that out. Also, National Beverage Day, National Crepe Suzette Day. That's why it's International No Diet Day. It's because I like crepe Suzettes. Those things are really good. And then National Meeting Planners Appreciation Day, National Nurses Day. Praise y'all for the nurses that took care of Sandi this last week. And she took care of them because she was ministering to them while she was in the hospital. And then National Tourist Appreciation Day and No Homework Day. Okay, so you're supposed to do homework to study out Melanoma Monday, but it's no homework day, so you can do it tomorrow. National Tourist Appreciation Day. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever get upset with those tourists that are in town? They don't know where they're going, and they're stopping in the middle of intersections, and they're like driving really slow because they're looking at the sights or whatever. Well, just remember, they're bringing in money to your community when they're in town. So appreciate them and thank them for coming by and visiting in your city, because that's what keeps jobs in your city, as we appreciate that. How about this? Some things going on this week. Be Kind to Animals Week, National Children's Mental Health Awareness Week, and National Small Business Week. And National Small Business Week, I have to say this: support your local businesses. If you can buy something locally, and especially if you can buy it from a local business as opposed to a big box store or something like that, you know what? That supports people within your community, as opposed to getting online because it's so easy to get it from Amazon or from some of these other places. Go try to get it locally first and from your independent businesses. I just like doing that. I try to support local businesses as much as I can. How about some other things going on this month? I mean, we talked about Be Kind to Animals Week. It's also Be Kind to Animals Month. It's Better Sleep Month. Sleep is a restoration remedy for many, many ailments or issues of life. Also, Breathe Easy Month. Quotes for Monday, May 6, 2019. Positive quote of the day: nobody cares if you can't dance well, just get up and dance. Well, who said that? Dave Barry. So if you dance really good, like Frank Sinatra and all those guys like that, and you have the really nice, snazzy little footwork going on, that's great. Or if you dance like Elaine on Seinfeld, just get up and dance. How about funny quote of the day? You're supposed to laugh. Now get ready. From Woody Allen. Not my favorite character in life, but that's where the quote came from. You have to learn to push the guilt under the rug and move on. Otherwise, it overwhelms you. I didn't think that was very funny, because after all, I don't think we should just push guilt under the rug. I think we need to be delivered from guilt, because that's the enemy that wants to cause us to live in the mistakes of our past. And Yeshua set us free from our past. Is that not right? How about love quote of the day? No, I was supposed to say that afterwards. From Robert Browning: grow old along with me. The best is yet to be. Okay, there you go. So those are my quotes of the day. Verse of the day. It's 3 verses taken out of the Brit Hadashah portion of this week's Torah portion. It's from Mark 12:29 through 31. Yeshua answered, the foremost is, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. I love that. Thank you, Yeshua, for making it clear. I mean, let's not get bogged down in the midst of the swamp. We just need to rise up above it and love Yah and love our neighbor. How's that sound? What happened on this day in history? On May 6th, in 1541, King Henry VIII orders a Bible in English be placed in every congregation. He says every church in England. I like to say every assembly place in England. How about this? In 1837, have you ever heard of this guy's name? John Deere? Yeah, you know, whether you go out there and buy a tractor that, used to be affordable. Now they're like $250,000, $400,000 for these things from John Deere. Well, John Deere created the first steel plow in 1837. 1840, here's something. The world's first adhesive postage stamp. You ever wonder when that started? Well, it was in 1840. On this day, it was called the penny black. It's the first used in Great Britain. And in 1889, Exposition Universelle, the World's Fair in Paris, opens with a recently completed Eiffel Tower serving as the entrance arch. I thought that was very interesting, because the Eiffel Tower is one of the most prominent tourist attractions of the world. Talking about tourism. How about this? In 1837, ever hear about the Hindenburg? Yes, the German airship Hindenburg explodes in flames at Lakehurst, New Jersey. I remember watching that movie back in the 70s or 80s. They came out with a movie called The Hindenburg. I think it was the 70s when I was still in school. And I think I watched it probably 4 or 5 times. Very, very interesting about that whole incident. 1941, Joseph Stalin becomes premier of the Soviet Union. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, I'd say that. Add a little musical interlude there. And in 1954, they said it could never be done, that it was impossible to run a 4-minute mile. Well, Roger Bannister of the UK becomes the first person to run a 4-minute mile, recording 3:59.4 in Iffley Road, Oxford, England. So, yep, he broke the stigma, and he broke that 4-minute mile, making the first record. Now, since then, it's like everybody does it, because it just had to get over that mental mindset, I guess. And in 2017, I added this one last one. Think this was very interesting. In 2017, just 2 years ago, on this day, France bans, get this, too thin fashion models. Yep, if you're too thin, you cannot be a fashion model in France, and makes labeling of digitally enhanced photos mandatory. So they airbrush or they do stuff like that, you gotta make it, you gotta label it and say, well, this image has been digitally enhanced. So there you go. Famous birthdays today. Sigmund Freud. Not one of my favorite characters in history, but yeah, Sigmund Freud. Actually, it's Sigismund Shlomo Freud. He's considered the father of psychology, an Austrian, born on this day in 1856, and he lived 83 years, passed away of cancer. Also, Orson Welles, remember this guy? He was born on this day in 1915. What's he remembered for? He's remembered for a couple different things, like the War of the Worlds that was produced in 1938, one of the most famous broadcasts in history of radio, because when they started that broadcast, they started it out as a news report, as if the world was being invaded by Martians. So very, very interesting. Actually had everybody listening up in arms, wondering if it was true, that they thought it really was true. And also he's famous for Citizen Kane in 1941, about the newspaper mogul William Randolph Hearst. And it consistently ranks as one of the world's greatest films, all-time greatest films. By the way, last week was William Randolph Hearst on Monday, Hearst's birthday. And he was also known as the father of fake news. Just so you know, where fake news started, I had a whole thing about that, but that was last week. And since we couldn't do last week, I'm moving on. So now since we got through all that part, I want to introduce to you my co-host today. And so we've got Sherry Flanagan joining me. She was my co-host this morning on the War Room. Good morning, Sherry. How are you?
Good morning. I was just thinking about William Randolph Hearst. He said, I think he's the one who said, if a dog bites a man, that's not news. But if a man bites a dog, that's news.
That's exactly right. He was known for that anything that was sensational, or he could make a headline to make a news article seem sensational, and always took up like the underdog story to make it much bigger. So he was known to be one that could stir up a nation about international incidences that were not international incidences. I mean, all sorts of stuff like that. So if you wonder what's going on with the news today, they got their lead from William Randolph Hearst. So also, I've got Ray joining me from the great state of Georgia. Good morning, Ray. How are you this morning?
Good morning. William Randolph Hearst is famous for saying, "You furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war," referring to the war down in Mexico that never actually happened until he started reporting it as being a war.
There you go. There you go. And that is exactly right. That was actually in that article. I'm glad that you brought that up. That was very, 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 very interesting. Thank you. Well, I'm waiting for James to join me or join us this morning, and just send in another request to see if we can get him connected. We've had internet issues on his side in the past, so hopefully his internet's up and running. So I've got some things I want to, some funny quotes for employee performance evaluations. So if you've ever been in the role of having to do an employee evaluation, you'll understand this. But if you've also been in the role of being evaluated, you might find this interesting. Okay, how about number one? Since my last report, he has reached rock bottom and has started to dig. Can you get any deeper than that? How about number two? His men would follow him anywhere, but only out of morbid curiosity. I think these things would not pass legal scrutiny. I don't know. Just how about this? Number three, I would not allow this employee to breed. I don't have any words to that, but I can never put that on employee performance evaluation. There's just no way. Who would say that? How about this one? Works well when under constant supervision and cornered in a trap. Have you ever had anybody that you wanted to say that to in an evaluation? Oh my goodness, I don't know if I would have hired anybody if I knew, but nevertheless, let's move on here. It says, when he opens his mouth, this is number 4, when he opens his mouth, it seems that this is only to change whichever foot was previously in there. I've known a few people like that. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm that person, but and since my wife isn't here, she doesn't have to agree with me on that one. So I just saying. Okay. How about this one? He would be out of his depth in a parking lot puddle. And they say these are real. These are real things that people put on their evaluation. Okay. And then this young lady has delusions of adequacy. Ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. I couldn't put these things on an evaluation. How about this one? Number 8. She sets low personal standards, then consistently fails to achieve them. Okay. Just two more that we have to suffer through here. This employee should go far, and sooner he starts, the better. Okay, and then one last one. This employee is depriving a village somewhere of an idiot. Well, Hillary Clinton did say it takes a village, and I disagree with her completely on that. Maybe that fits. This employee is depriving a village somewhere of an idiot. I'm going to just tell you this. I am not an HRC fan. If you haven't figured that one out already, or if you haven't listened to previous broadcasts, and so whenever you talk about village, I always remember that quote, and I'm thinking, man, she's out of her rank, because you know what? It's a family. It's always about the family, and families make up a village. But you know what? It still starts with the family. So there you go. Any thoughts, y'all, from our funny quotes from employee performance evaluations?
This wasn't an evaluation, but I got called in the office one time, and they said, "You're the only one here who hadn't had the flu shot." And I didn't say anything. I just looked at them. And they're like, "You're the only one here who hadn't had the flu shot. Everybody else has had the flu shot. We don't want a flu epidemic." I said, "So everybody else has the flu shot. So if I get the flu, they won't get it. Go back.
There you go.
Go back to your desk."
Exactly. I don't get it. Everybody's so up in arms about these vaccinations, and well, if you're vaccinated, why are you so concerned?
Well, I just found out something about vaccinations. I sent it for one of the Four Corners News to Mark. That's very shocking. They,
that is one of my soapboxes. That
did you know they have since 1963, they've had some aborted babies' cells in our vaccinations.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay, all right. Since we're there, since you brought it up, they actually take they take these these germs or whatever, and then they grow them on aborted fetuses. Aborted babies. I'm not going to use the word fetus. I like they take these babies that have been killed, and then they grow these vaccinations on these aborted babies. One of the places they grow them is on the aborted baby's kidneys. See, they take these babies and then they harvest their organs, and then they use them and they put them in the vaccination. So you wonder why. Then why we have so many issues besides all the other adjuvants and everything else that they go in there, or they grow them on eggs, and then you wonder why people have egg allergies. It's because of how they cause these the duplication of the vaccines and how they grow them and all that sort of stuff. It's all
if I had to choose between an egg and an aborted baby, give me the egg any day. And I'm allergic.
Absolutely.
I cannot take the flu shot, because the one time I took the flu shot, I got a horrible case of the flu. It was, weeks and weeks before, and the doctor's like, "No, you're allergic. No, don't do this anymore."
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's right. I've bit into the lies, and twice in my life I did take the flu shot, and this was back in the 90s. And both times I took them, it just made me so sick. But it only lasted a day for me, and I was like I'll never do that again.
3 or 4 weeks. When I finally did go back to work, they're like, "We think you need to go back home. You look horrible."
Yep. That's right. That's right. James, we've got you today. And I'm so glad. I was like, "James, you're going to be here, right? You're going to be here."
I'm here.
And he's not a talking hat.
That's right.
I'm here. How are you guys?
We're doing good. It's good to have you back this week, and it's good to be back on the air again this week. We missed out for the last couple of weeks, so it's good to be here.
How's Sandi feeling?
She is doing better, and continue to pray. She's just exhausted, and reason. She literally, it was a fight for her life, and so she has. But she's pushed through. She's gotten to the other side, and she's at home, and we're medicating at home. And otherwise, they said she really needed to be in the hospital 1 more week. But she is supposed to act as if she's still in the hospital another week. So, and then plus on top of that, and it's very interesting. She I was reading about what she was afflicted with and how strep gets into the blood system. And she's been dealing with anemia. So without having the right levels of red blood cells, it also just contributed to how quickly that strep was able to, it was how is it said? It was cellulitis caused by strep. And so that strep got in between the epidermis and the dermis, and it just started on the side of her face and her ear and just went all the way across. And and it's still in her bloodstream, but we've been praying, and we believe that it is completely eradicated. And so she's doing stuff about the low iron in her blood, and she's continuing with the antibiotics, and much better than what she was. So
amen.
Thank you for asking.
The life and the blood issue is driving that stuff out of her blood. That's
right. The life is in the blood, and that's exactly right. And think about that. Our blood carries a frequency, and that frequency, for example, communicates in itself. But if you take a vial of your blood and you take it all the way across to Australia, and then with some type of stimulus of where you are, let's say here in America, let's say, and I'm using this as an example. I don't watch scary movies, but some people do. But if someone is frightened, maybe from a scary movie or from a circumstance, their blood in Australia will respond to that stimulus because it's connected, even when it's separated from our body. Isn't that interesting? So when we understand that, that's why Yeshua's blood is still resonating today, because he's alive.
Amen.
So very, very interesting. Dr. Ted Broer was talking about that phenomena, and I really like listening to him because he has some really, really good, interesting health insights, as well as other news insights as well. So
It's odd that the blood of Yeshua is the blood of Elohim, the blood of God himself. That's why it never dries out. You hear a lot of the old songs. There is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. Sinners plunge beneath the flood. His blood isn't dried out. It's not dried.
yeah. Yes.
And he said, touch me and see that I'm flesh and bone. So he shed every drop of his blood for us. There's more than enough for everybody born from the beginning of time to the ending of time to have the forgiveness of their sins.
That's exactly right. That's it. And I find it very interesting too. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Ron Wyatt and what he has found, and what he's passed away now, but he said that he found the Ark of the Covenant, and they found the blood on the Ark of the Covenant, and that it was directly underneath where that cross was, and that in the earthquake, his blood literally dripped down in the crevices into Jeremiah's grotto, where that ark has been kept safe and stored. And they said they found the blood whenever the priest would come in on the east side of it, on the front, from the bulls and the rams, but on the west side is where they found the dried blood of Yeshua. And then they said he took a sample of it back, and the person in the laboratory put the saline solution and was looking at it, and he said, "Where did you get this blood? It's living. It's living." And I was like, "Whoa, that is amazing." So, anyway,
and
go ahead, Sherry.
A study on the blood of Yeshua, and one of the things what's H.A. Maxwell White, Whyte, has a wonderful book, The Power in the Blood, and he really nails it down. And I've asked the Lord for years, what does it mean the life is in the blood? And I've heard all kinds of different things, but what really nailed it down for me is the blood is the carrier of the life. The blood carries the life. The blood itself is not life. It carries the life. So his blood carries the life of Elohim. No wonder the devil runs from it. When we start pleading the blood and applying the blood to him, and the blood covenant that we have in Yeshua's shed blood, the life of God himself, and life drives out death.
Yes. If we ever silenced the things that said in the book of Leviticus, in Vayikra, about the blood, we'd never understand the fullness of the power of the blood of Yeshua. All just the prophetic implications completely fulfilled with Yeshua. Amazing. Well, we're ready to jump into our next segment here for the Torah portion. And James, I asked you to bring the Torah portion, and what do you got for us today?
Well, today we're on Parashah 30. It's Kodashim, which means holy people. It's Vayikra, or Leviticus 19:1 through 10:27. something interesting about the book of Vayikra or Leviticus is it's the heart of the Torah. And what I mean by that, it's the third book. There's 5 books in the Torah. It is the center book of the Torah. It's literally the heart of the Torah. Leviticus used to be probably the book before I truly understood the Torah and understood what the Torah was. It was the book that I most disregarded, the book that I really didn't like it, because I didn't understand it. I thought it didn't pertain to us. I thought it had nothing to do with us. But once I've learned more and more about it and how that Leviticus is the heart of the Torah and what it means by being Kodashim, it means basically the reason it's called the heart of the Torah is because it teaches us how to be set apart. It teaches us what he considers and what he wants from us to be holy, to be set apart, and to be his treasured possession. And see, Exodus 19:5-6 talks about that we are called his treasure, special treasure possession. We are his people. We have entered into a covenant relationship with our Messiah. And the thing is that our Messiah came back and restored us to that covenant that was made at Sinai, that we broke over and over and over again, that we continued to spit in our Elohim's face because we wanted to worship other gods. But he came and he gave up his life so that we could be restored to that covenant. And what it teaches is that the worst thing about today, I'm learning what is the difference between the Nazarene or the Messianics and the Christianity. Christianity teaches that all you need is Yeshua. That's it. You don't need anything else. But the difference between Messianics or the Nazarene is that we believe that once you have Messiah, that you're called to a bigger purpose. You're called to something bigger. And we're called to be holy. We're called to be set apart. And that means we follow the Torah. 1 John 5:1 says that we know that we love God if we obey his commandments. We know that we love the children of God. And if we obey his commandments, and they're not burdensome. And the thing is, if you look at that, I've been in churches that have taught that the Torah or the law was a burden. Yet, if you read 1 John says that it's not a burden, and that it actually, the only way that we can love God with all our heart, mind, and soul and love our neighbors ourselves is if we obey his commandments. That's what it says. The 10 commandments teach us. First 5 teaches how to love God. The second 5 teaches how to love our neighbors ourselves. All 613 wrapped up. And that's what it all boils down to, is that we are called to something more. We're called to be set apart. We're called to basically be sojourners in this land and to be just passing through. And we're called, when people look at us, they should see something different. They shouldn't see a hypocrite. They shouldn't see that, they say that I'm doing this sin, but then they're doing that sin. They shouldn't see that. But if you look at the church today, that's what you see, because we're not practicing holiness. We're not practicing set apartness. But today I was going to talk about being set apart, walking in righteousness and what it means, and kind of what we've learned as we've kind of entered into this Torah observant life. You want to go, Sherry? Because I don't think they're here right now.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay.
I was waiting for the next comment there. No, you're exactly right. But Sherry, yeah, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Now, years ago, because I'm a little older than you, James, I will not admit that to many people, but hallelujah. It did not used to be that just come to Jesus and do whatever you wanted. There was a thing called Christian discipline. And if you look back in our history, you'll see that they always had discipline books. Maybe they didn't know about the feast. Maybe they didn't understand about the Sabbath, but they did have disciplines that they were to live a life. When you took Yeshua as your Lord and Master, you were to live the life that he said to live. Now, a very interesting thing about holiness, and I'm going to throw this out there. Holiness is actually not behavior. Holiness is where God owns us and we're to abide by his rules. It's actually not, we're holy because he's made us holy, because he bought us, therefore we're set apart for his use. That's one of the meanings of holiness, is that we're set apart. So it's actually not behavior that makes us holy, but we have the behavior because we are holy. Does that make sense? So we are called to a higher standard. We are to be separate but yet we're in the world. We're, we're to shine forth the light of Yeshua. We've been given the ministry of reconciliation. And what happens is people say, well, how come your life goes so well and mine is just going to, where, the hot place in a handbasket? And it's because, well, it's the God I worship. It's the God I belong to. It doesn't mean we won't have problems and trials and tribulations in life, but it's because he's with us. He never leaves us nor deserts us, and he makes the difference. So being the set apart is actually his ownership of us. And then we got to act. You cannot say Yeshua is my Lord and Master and not do what he says. It just doesn't compute.
That's so true, Sherry. That is so true when it comes down to what much in the realm of the body of Messiah that's being taught today. And I question, how much of the body of Messiah these people are actually, when they say, well, we got it all at the cross. And so therefore he did it. So now I can just live my life. I got the Jesus piece, that type of attitude, because I never understood that attitude before, because I always understood it differently. And like you were talking about, we're set apart, and like what James was talking about, but that's exactly right. Ray, what are your thoughts about the Torah portion?
Leviticus 22:11 says, but if the priest buy any soul with his money, he shall eat of it, and he that is born in his house, they shall eat of his meat. Now that word meat is actually the word lechem, which is bread. So if you are a slave in the high priest's house, you eat of his bread. And what, of course, did Yeshua say? Is to eat of him, because he is the bread that came down from heaven. He's literally using allegorical terms that made sense to the people who understood the Torah at the time, to let them know exactly what kind of relationship they're getting into, which is the slave and slave master relationship, which then, of course, can lead to a permanent placement in the home, where you're no longer looked at as simply as a servant, but you'll be looked at as a brother. And he says, eventually, if you'll work with me, I'll treat you just like my friends. I will tell you my business. I'll tell you what my plans are. I'll let you know what I'm aiming to do. I won't just simply treat you as a pawn on a chessboard. I'll treat you as someone who's helping me to create the world as it should be. I lost audio on you.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hit that mute button. My goodness, James, you want to wrap it up for us here on the?
Yes. Yeah, I loved how you said that. Basically, it's not an action. It's that what he's done for us is basically set us apart. It has made us holy. And I love that, because that is, and like you said, it used to be taught that, because I do know this, at one point there were people that obeyed the Sabbath. Even though they obeyed the Sunday Sabbath, they obeyed the Sabbath. And this stuff has just faded out over the years. But, it shows the times that we live in too, because he says that there will be a falling away will come first. And there's going to be people who are going to fall away from the faith. And we're seeing that today. And it's what happens is we're falling away from truth. I kind of wrapping it up. I just say that, the biggest thing is that I can see is that the whole word of God is applies to our life. And the books that I used to think were boring, like Leviticus, are my favorite books today, because they explain exactly what it means to be in a covenant relationship with our Father.
Oh, all right. Wow. Very good. Very succinct. That's exactly right. And, and here's one of the things that I just thought about, and we talked about in our Torah portion this last week, is that beginning with chapter 18 Leviticus through the end of Leviticus, we actually see him saying that I am the Lord your God. I am Yahweh your Elohim. He actually says that from 18 through the rest of the chapter over 50 times. Yet prior to chapter 18, he says it one time. And when you're looking at the whole expanse of the book, that first part of the book is about the relationship with the priests and the temple and their form and their functions and all that sort of stuff, the tabernacle. And yet now from this point going forward, it's about all of these instructions for the people, for the nation, for the corporate body. And why is he saying that? And it just reminded me about the first commandment. I am the Lord your God. It means, essentially it means believe. And so everything that he's saying from this point forward is that he is personally involved in our lives. Personally involved. So when he's personally involved, it means he's personally wanting us to be set apart as his and his alone. So I've got this article here, and I wanted to, I don't know, I said it was on the Drudge Report. I'm going to stick it over here in our little comments on the side. I can't put it into the chat room. I apologize for that because I can't link both my computer and the chat room at the same time because of my bandwidth. But nevertheless, this is an article. It's from abcnews.com. And it's really, I wanted to use this to launch us into this next section because I really believe there's an end time connection with this article and the things that are happening in the Middle East. The article is aircraft carrier sent to Middle East after indications Iran planned attack on U.S. forces. Well, what's this all about? Well, this last week, the United States put an end to all waivers for the nations that were continuing to buy oil from Iran because Iran has these sanctions placed upon them. Certain nations were allowed waivers to get their affairs in order to get oil from other sources. That by May the 2nd, the waivers would come to an end, and anybody that's still doing business with Iran would therefore be placed under sanctions with the United States and embargoes and all the economic issues that go along with that. So the waivers officially ended, which Iran said, if you do this and you cut off our ability to sell our oil, then what's going to happen is we're going to close down the Strait of Hormuz. Well, this article kind of is talking towards that. The United States is deploying an aircraft carrier strike group and bomber task force to the Middle East on short notice in response to clear indications Iran and Iranian proxies were planning an attack on U.S. forces in the region, a U.S. official said. Now, let's keep in mind that the attack is not against U.S. and U.S. forces only. It's against Israel and the allies of the United States that are in the area. As we know that since May 2nd, Hamas has began just pelting Israel with rockets, and there were hundreds and hundreds of rockets went up over this weekend to the point that the IDF was about ready to invade Gaza, and then Hamas came back and said, okay, we're ready for a ceasefire. Well, after they did all sorts of damage, that was the whole purpose, but they are a proxy of Iran. Going on, it says, add Iran as an interest to stay up to date on wait a minute. Okay, that was just a little blurred. So late Sunday night, the White House made a surprise announcement that the USS Abraham Lincoln and Bomber Task Force were being deployed in response to unspecified, troubling, and escalatory indications and warnings. A statement from the National Security Advisor John Bolton said the deployments were intended to send a clear and unmistakable message to the Iranian regime that any attacks on United States interests or on those of our allies will be met with unrelenting force. The United States is not seeking war with the Iranian regime, but we are fully prepared to respond to any attack, whether by proxy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or regular Iranian forces, the statement said. So it goes on and it talks about the deployment of that. It's a pretty short article, pretty short piece. But as you know, with what's happened in Israel, with the fact that I think they said up to is it 30% of the world's oil, maybe up to 80%? I can't remember the exact number, but a huge amount of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, which is between Iran and Yemen. there down at the Persian Gulf area, and Iran had been moving into position missiles to be from hidden areas to be able to strike that area and strike any type of shipping that would be passing through that area. Of course, there is a strike group in the Persian Gulf, and then this other one that's moving in that direction would be like a pincer type of strangling upon Iran and anything they might try to do. But it's leading up to a lot of different things, and I think it partially relates to this week's Torah portion. And part of that is it's about how these type of events in the world, wars, rumors of wars, are meant to bring an awakening to people, to set people apart. But anyway, just wanted to get y'all's thoughts about this. And Ray, since I see you there, what are your thoughts about what's going on over there?
Anytime war is being discussed, my first question is who's selling the arms and who's making the most profit off of it when it comes to real war. What the Palestinians are doing to Israel is terrible, but that's not really war. That's a continuous, nonstop terrorist action with no real goal. I mean, what's the goal? Palestine has already received Gaza. Gaza has been surrendered. There is what do they intend to accomplish except to look like consistent, irrational terrorists when they randomly fire rockets onto a civilian population? I mean, honestly, I'm surprised that Israel I mean, why don't they just stick a couple? I mean, Israel builds drone airstrike forces. A lot of those are built in Israel. They should have drones sitting at the border, just watching, waiting to watch the ignition fire from the rockets, and then strike, and then just 50 caliber round right down everywhere that it happened at. They have that kind of technology. Why isn't it being used? The Iron Dome system is a multi-billion-dollar system, and it's costing millions and millions and millions of dollars to continuously intercept these rockets. This recent attack they did, it was the first time that Israel has actually done a quote-unquote precision strike on an actual Hamas leader in recent history, because they had stopped doing that in, I think, 2014 as a gesture of peace, as an olive branch. And now they're going back to the policy of essentially they're not even going to shoot the average person on the ground that's shooting rockets. They're just going to directly strike their commanders and let them know that they know where they are and that they know who they are, and they will continue to execute them every time one of them, rallies up an army. And hopefully that'll stop it. And honestly, I think by the end of the day, 10 years from now, they're going to say Israel is the only army who was as close to being pacifistic as they could, where they precisely killed one individual to stop 200 or 300 others from continuing to do what they were going to do, because they saw their commanders consistently killed whenever they started this thing up. So
very interesting.
100%.
Ray, I'm glad you brought that up. It's very interesting because according to the Hal Turner radio show, and they actually did take out 2 Hamas leading commanders just yesterday, and took them out, and it was in his subscriber intel section. So very interesting. They did exactly what you said.
I am amazed at the patience and restraint that Israel has shown consistently when dealing with these folks. I mean, and you can understand, it's not like they don't know what's going on. It's not like they don't have highly sophisticated weapons systems. The Iron Dome system, like there's nothing else like that on the planet. I mean, the Israelis were the first to invent tanks that used rockets as attack weapons instead of using a standard shell that would be put into the big gun, basically. I forgot what they called them, but in the 80s, they were the only ones that even had that technology, and they were blasting people from 50 miles away with their tanks, when usually the maximum range is like, I don't know, 5 miles or something like that you could even hit something at. I mean, they have tremendous technology, and they have shown tremendous restraint. I mean, honestly, they could just bulldoze the whole place over if they wanted to, but they're not. They're really waiting. And I mean, there's no other country on earth that you could imagine being under this kind of continuous assault and not, frankly, just glassing the whole place over. I mean, honestly, if Canada was bombing an American city consistently with just ridiculous amounts, do you really think the American military wouldn't just invade that city and end it? I mean, it would be over. You'd hear about it for one day and then it would be over.
Yeah.
I mean, Israel has showed just incredible patience. I mean, honestly, they should have never gave it up in the first place. But the patience that they have shown, the world gives them no credit for how patient and how persistently non-aggressive they have been. And I do hope that one day they decide to just say, well, it's time to stop taking it and do something about it.
All right. James, what are your thoughts on it?
I'm right there with Ray. I don't. I've never been a person that's liked to be bullied, and I look at Hamas like a bunch of bullies. That's all they are. They literally shoot rockets at civilians. And you're right, Ray. If Canada or Mexico started bombing us, it would only take about 3 or 4 bombs before we would go and take Mexico or take Canada over. And it just shows the patience that they've had. Hamas. I mean, I'm pretty sure Hamas means destroyer, and I don't know if it's Arabic or Hebrew or something, but it basically Hamas is they're a terrorist group. They train their children from a young age to kill Israelis, and that's what they're trained to do. If that's what your life is going to be, we need to take them out anyways. That's my opinion. That's not a godly opinion. That's just the fact that I don't like to see people getting hurt, and I've never been someone that's like to see someone else being taken advantage of. And I think Palestine does that to Israel, and then I think the world looks at Israel and says they're the bad guy, but that's what the Bible says is going to happen.
You know, it's interesting too that right now where all these attacks have all started, it's really at the beginning of what their month of Ramadan is, and it seems like in the past, historically, it's supposed to be a month of celebration that the Muslims have, but on the other side, it's also been a month that historically has been a month of a lot of their homicide bombers and attacks have taken place. So my antennas are really alert this month as to what's going on down there, because I think there's more to come. There's more for us to be paying attention to in spite of what's going on. So Sherry, what are your thoughts?
Well, the scripture talks about people being thorns in their sides and pricks to their eyes. And that just can't keep going on. You know, if you watch them, they'll do all this stuff. And then when Israel says, okay, we're really coming after you, they're like, oh no. It's like I had a little dog that used to run across the street and run up and down the neighbor's fence and bark at the big, huge dog behind the fence. Okay. And then one day she did the same thing, but the dog wasn't behind the fence. And when she realized the dog wasn't behind the fence, you go like this. That's what Hamas does. As long as Israel stays behind their fence and doesn't really, they are going after them. I'm not saying that. But when they don't go after them to wipe them out, then it keeps on barking. But when they start getting on the other side of that fence, they start back crawling. I'm with everybody else. They should never have given them that land anyway, because it's God's land and it's not the nation's decision to decide who it goes to. God's already given the land to Israel. The ambassador Danon before the UN read about the greater Israel before the UN and then held up the scripture and says, this is our deed to the land. And he was exactly right, and it precedes anything the nations try to tell Israel. I mean, that's just their land. And but that's, and about the Hormuz, about the Straits of Hormuz, that waterway does not belong to Iran. It's international waterway. See, it's by Iran. So if they come out to stop people, that's like an act of war against the whole world, because that is international waterways. And you were saying earlier, I looked it up, 35% of the sea-borne oil comes through the Straits of Hormuz, 20% of the world's oil. So you think the rest of the nations are going to sit back and not do something? I mean, they may try to wait for us to do something on the front end, I'm just like, they need, and also my son was telling me, which has not been carried on the news, but that they had protesters against Hamas in Gaza, or not carried very much on the news. Protesters against Hamas in Gaza, and Hamas went out and started shooting their own citizens. So they're a really wicked organization, and they need to come down.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's a complete media blackout in Israel from these weekend attacks. So not a lot of information is getting out from that area. So it's only those that have particular intel sources. And one article, I hadn't read the whole thing, and it seemed kind of sensational to me, but it was talking about how they think that this is could be a precursor to the Gog-Magog war. I don't know about that as much as, it's things that we're certainly watching. Certainly things we're watching. Well, very good. I think it's also a point where people have to recognize that there's only one way that we have protection in life. I mean, honestly, we can do everything we possibly can physically, but only Yah can be our protector. And we've got to pray that Psalm 91 over ourselves and our families every single day, and it's in the secret place of the Most High that we find that shelter and that protection. So, well, let's move on to the next section here and next segment, and that is on the Haftorah. And I wanted to go over to Amos chapter 9. So if y'all want to go over there with me, Amos chapter 9, verses 7 through 15 in this version of the Haftorah. I know different studies pull out different Haftorah versions, but this is the one that I'm using. And it's Amos chapter 9, verses 7 through 15. And I want to let's start with verse 7. Are you not the sons of Ethiopia to me, O sons of Israel, declares the Lord? Have I not brought up Israel from the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Arameans from Kir? Behold, the eyes of Yahweh, God, are on the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from the face of the earth. Nevertheless, I will not totally destroy the house of Jacob, declares Yahweh. For behold, I am commanding, and I will shake the house of Israel among all nations, as grain is shaken in a sieve, but not a kernel will fall to the ground. All the sinners of my people will die by the sword, those who say the calamity will not overtake us or confront us. In that day, I will raise up the fallen tabernacle of David and wall up its breaches, and I will also raise up its ruins and rebuild it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the nations who are called by my name, declares Yahweh who does this. Behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when the plowman will overtake the reaper, the treader of grapes, him who sows seed, when the mountains will drip sweet wine, and all the hills will be dissolved. Also, I will restore the captivity of my people Israel, and they will rebuild the ruined cities and live in them. They will plant vineyards and drink their wine, make their gardens and eat their fruit. I will also plant them on their land, and they will not again be rooted out from their land, which I have given them, says Yahweh your Elohim. So this little passage here in Amos really is full of all sorts of different things, but in one sense is, remember, it's talking about the whole house of Israel, or the house of Jacob, and how it's even saying all the sinners of my people will die by the sword, those who say the calamity will not overtake us or confront us. So yet it says that a remnant is going to possess the land. And yet here we are at so many different things. I mean, I would say over the last 3 and 4 years, probably more than any other time in my lifetime, we've been living in the time of the wars and remnants of wars, or rumors of wars. And it just seems to continue to be ramping up, because I think it's all about the end time shaking. It's about the shaking of Israel that's been scattered, dispersed among the four corners of the world and all the nations of the world. And so we have all these different pieces coming together, and yet it says that Yahweh will raise up the tabernacle of David, the house of David, where David stretched his tent, basically from the Euphrates to the Nile, that Yahweh is going to restore that and bring that back. So with these different things, it really, again, shows us the who's qualified, who's going to be qualified to be part of that. And as James, you were talking about, and all of y'all were talking about this, the kedoshim, the holy, to be set apart unto Yah, is all about our inheritance. It's all about our future. It's all about what our taking possession of that which Yah has promised us. And we see all these pieces coming together, and I want to kind of tie it all together and get y'all's thoughts on this. And let me start with you, James. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think David, David, he lived a life where, he not make mistakes? Yeah, but he definitely had a life devoted to Yahweh. And I think, when you're restoring the tabernacle of David, you're restoring true worship of Yahweh as well. Because I truly believe David had set up worship in the way of our Creator was supposed to be. Also, I think that's where in these last days, it says that again that we would worship Him in spirit and the Ruach and met in truth. And I truly believe that Yahweh is restoring that in our time frame. That He is basically bringing people back to the true worship of Him. No longer are we going to worship other gods, but we're going to worship Him in the way that He was created. Us and our lives are going to start looking more set apart from the world instead of looking like hypocrites.
All right. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, James. And I think that's really important. It's really to make our lives really clear that we do what we believe. We don't just say what we believe, but we do what we believe, so we don't come across that way. Sherry, your thoughts about this half Torah portion?
Well, like you said, there's a whole lot in here that you could go off on all kinds of rabbi trails.
Yeah.
But raising up the tabernacle of David, it's being rebuilt, I think, in our time, where the tabernacle of David is worshiping God. But that last one there, verse 15, I will also plant them. It says, 14, I will restore the captivity of my people Israel, and they will rebuild the ruined cities and live in them. It says, I'll also plant them on their land, and they will not again be rooted out of their land, which I have given them. So that's why the scripture comes to my mind. Why do the nations rage and imagine a vain thing? They're wanting to throw off the fetters of God, the chains of God that keeps them corralled. They don't want to do what God says, and they want to go in and try to tell Israel, or God, actually, they want to tell the people that God has allowed to live in the land what God can and can't do with His own land. That's ridiculous. And He's not going to put up with that. And He's already said here, they will not again be rooted out of their land, which I have given them. So, and some of the tabernacle of David, like one of the things of bringing the tabernacle of David in is a restoration of the two houses coming together. Israel and their companions, Judah and his companions, all joining together, raising up the tabernacle of David. So we can see shades of that coming in, because we'll be in the land. We'll be in the land with Messiah. So that's just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's really good. in a dictionary definition of a breach, where it's talking about there, Sherry, in that day I will raise up the fallen booth of David, and I will wall up its breaches. Breach is an infraction or violation of a law, a broken, ruptured, or torn condition, a split, crack, or divide between two sides, a break in friendly relations. So think about this week's Torah portion, how it's talking about Kedoshim, and it starts giving us commandments, and then it's all infused with "I am Yahweh," and in this, when we think about how the original breach took place between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and we can continue to see that even in our generation, the violations of the instructions of Yah, and how desperately we're needing those infractions and violations to be reversed and mended and made whole in order for the whole house of Israel to come back together. Just kind of some thoughts, more thoughts I had on that. But Ray, what are your thoughts about these things?
We have a tendency when reading these prophetic scriptures to try to stick them into our own time, but I believe that this has already been fulfilled from a careful reading of these words. For instance, the word your translation does well translating as booth, not as tabernacle, because when we think tabernacle, we think of the Mishkan, but that's not the word Mishkan there. That word is kuka, which is very like sukkah, which is that kind of booth. It could even be a reference to the re-celebrating of the Festival of Tabernacles. You have to remember, this prophecy is coming in the time when the Assyrians have already conquered Israel and Babylon's coming. These guys, let's make sure of that for sure. You have to remember, they were very mad at Edom for betraying them instead of helping them. That Edom turned its back on them. So of course the vengeance, they want to have it upon Edom, and they do have vengeance upon Edom, because after the Assyrian kings take over, the northern kingdom of Israel is vacated by the Assyrians. They take everyone into captivity. So the land is pretty much barren. So they take people from Edom and repopulate it. These people later become known as what we think of as the Samaritans. And the Samaritans, even today, are still under rule by the Jews, as they were during the time of the first century. They didn't necessarily have their own ability to rule. And of course, the Pharisees spoke against them constantly. Let's see what else we've got here. The idea of never being uprooted for their land. There's been no official decree to uproot Jews from the land. Now, the land was renamed Philistina by the Romans, and the Romans forbade any Jew from entering Jerusalem after the second Jewish revolt in the AD 100s. But I don't think there's been any official decree disallowing Jews to exist in the Holy Land in general. And they have existed in the Holy Land for thousands of years. Everyone did not go into the diaspora. There were certainly Jews, Muslims, and Christians all existing in the Holy Land during the time of the first, second, third Crusades, and during the entire time it was ruled over by the Muslims and by the Turks. So there's always been the remnant there, living, dwelling there and waiting. It's not as though these things haven't occurred. A lot of this prophecy is describing God's wrath upon Israel for what it has failed to do. He's basically saying, look, here's your judgment. It's coming. Here's why it's coming. Get used to the idea. But before it's all over, I will restore you. And he did. He restored them after the Babylonian captivity. In fact, with the idea of the reference of the two houses coming back together, modern rabbis will tell you that the two houses have already returned together, and that they returned together during the Babylonian captivity, which is when the Assyrians were conquered by the Babylonians. They took the Assyrian slaves for their own and took plenty of them down into Babylon, because of course Nebuchadnezzar wanted everyone to become Babylonians, which was common at the time. You know, it's the same way the Greeks wanted all of Israel to be Greek. They wanted them to let go of their customs and traditions and to integrate completely into Greek culture. Same way with the Babylonian. They wanted them to let go of being Israelites and become Babylonians. This is why you see them take the best of the Israelites, which would be Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and turn them into, seers or wise men for the court of Babylon, because the idea was that they would become Babylonians. And even when the captivity ended, it's not like everybody went back. I think only 50,000 out of like 1 million returned to Israel. Most of them stayed and continued being Babylonians. From what I'm seeing, it's been fulfilled. Now it may be fulfilled again, depending on how you view things, if you view him as being cyclical or not. But I don't see him failing to honor his word here. Especially, we're very careful about what we read, and if we really knew all of the complete history of Israel after the Babylonian captivity.
All right. Yeah, I do believe that first off, Bible prophecy is cyclical, and I think there's many fulfillments within Scripture. I think we can actually show that to take place, and yes, and I agree that the tabernacle is not talking about the Mishkan; it is talking about the sukkah. It's the tent of David, or the booth. In the New American Standard says booth, and the thing that we really see in Israel right now, we see them planting vineyards, and we see them, the agricultural production in Israel is just tremendous. In fact, when Sandy and I went there, the food is so good. I mean, absolutely no indigestion whenever I ate the produce of the land. And so, I mean, just amazing what they can produce there, and it's good stuff. And yet we still have the other fulfillment of it, is that there's the only people that are allowed to move into that land and actually be part of Israel are those that are considered Jews, or the Yahudim. And as opposed to, Jews, Levites, Benjamites, those that were in the southern kingdom, and yet the northern kingdom is not being welcomed at this point in time. There's still fulfillment of that needs to take place. But I really see that the breach, when that is healed, is it really is healed when Messiah comes. It's really completed when Messiah it brings it all together. And I really see that on the bottom line of it is that when the ruins are rebuilt is when the fulfillment of his people keeping Torah is brought to its fullness. And so that's just my thoughts on that. We're still waiting for that fulfillment to take place. And so that's I want to just kind of wrap it up here with this part of the segment today. Well, we have about run out of time, and so I want to see what we can do. Just going to wrap this up. I want to say thank you so much for joining me, both Ray, Sherry, and James today here on the program, and being part of the program. And just to remind everybody that you can catch all of these programs over at MessianicLambRadio.com. If you haven't ever gone there to listen to any of the programming, go there and connect with us there. Also, I want to remind that tomorrow at this time, the Let Us Reason Together edition of the show is called Chameleon Church. I want to remind y'all to stay tuned with that here on the Lamb Network. And we will be back next week with Let Us Reason Together. So if you like the show, like what you heard today, share us on your social media, give us a thumbs up. Sure appreciate that. And again, thank you, James, Sherry, and Ray, for being part of the show. And until next time, shalom.